Good morning. Today is Saturday. It's the last week of September. We enter into October and early fall. I stayed local today because I didn't really have a destination that was begging my attention up north. I'll be up there next week. To all the people that are at the Whitehall Affair this weekend, have a great time. Obviously, I didn't get there. I literally just had a tree, something come down, so I'm about to go investigate that. This is an interesting neighborhood, though, so we're going to do that, and my intro has been prioritized, so bear with me. I'm going to switch modes and go into an investigator mode and see what the hell that was. Be back in a bit. We're following up on what that falling limb was. Odds are it was probably just that, a falling limb, but I'm pausing to allow for something moving away, but there is a lot of background noise and the potential for the odd migrator coming down this far, this early in the season. Take the hint, because they do. Just it's a little early, in my opinion, from past experience. But never say never. I'd allow for drought conditions up north, having seen evidence of that last week rather. But we've had the same thing down here. We're not really any better off than Vermont was, so I don't think that's a viable theory. I don't see anything moving. It's just all too funny that I'm standing there doing an intro for the video and something falls down. I'm trying to find out what it was, though. See if there's an obvious... I don't see anything obvious, though. That being said, I often advocate going to have a look, so let's kind of briefly do that. I don't see anything obvious, though. And my bigger interest would be obviously the fact of something moving away rapidly, like a territorial display or something. I just don't see anything like that, so... That being said, I also allow for black bears. There's at least 3 that I know of that den in the immediate area. Because once again, Connecticut does have bears, and there is a rising population of them. Not quite to the New Jersey level in the suburbs yet, but we're getting there. But it would seem that that's not the case around at this point. So we're going to cover some ground, head a little bit further to the west that way, and we will check back in shortly. So I guess the big news of the week is the Whitehall Affair. And again, to people who make it there, have a great time. Tell Dave and Steve McCullough and Culls, respectively, I said hi. To anyone else that was gonna run into me up there too. For the record, I make plans to try to get there every year, and every year it sneaks up on me and I forget till the last minute, so that's why I'm out walking through this stuff today. Again, for clarity, we're not in Vermont, we're in Connecticut. But I don't know. I'll have to check in once I get a little bit more into an open area. This is in the summer and early fall. This is kind of the first segment. You got to kind of navigate through the undergrowth here. It's not thick in every stretch, but there are patches of it. And I'm hucking because the not the leaves, but the green. I mean, not the green, the yellow source of hay fever being what it is, there's no shortage of it this year, so bear with me. If nothing else, I'll recount a sighting report from, I hesitate to call it the NESRA database, because after we parted ways, they kind of abandoned their rights to the information. So at this point, it's the NESN database. And anyone wanting to dispute that, show me your copyright. We can talk about that. Otherwise, shut the up and own your shit. Anyway, we're also deliberately kind of going into an area I haven't been in a while in here, just to kind of remind myself how big an area this actually is. It doesn't scale equally with Vermont being a national forest, but the area that we're talking about, look at that on a map, and it is one co-joining of about 5 state forests on both sides of the Mass-Connecticut state line. The reason I'm staying south today is because were I to kind of make a mistake and cross the line into Mass, I would not be legally carrying something. So we're not going to do that. And if I get like hard up for things to talk about, there is an interesting challenge right now, if you are a 2A enthusiast, of New Hampshire and a bunch of other states effectively challenging the Massachusetts state line. I don't personally think they have a very good chance necessarily of winning, mainly because there's a lot of precedent for state law transcending the national standard for that, basically because there is no national standard on gun laws and shit. And I don't know, nor do I really personally care where you stand on the particular issue. It is something where I go from having a relatively, if there is such a thing, libertarian / centrist view of things, to it's in the Constitution and the right to self-defense is a human right, not a freaking right given by the Constitution. It's given because the laws of natural selection basically fucking say so, in my less than humble opinion. And to the nanny state folks that want to say otherwise, as I guess I am going to delve into a little bit of mixed bag politics today. It's kind of hard not to these days. If you haven't taken a look at what's currently going on in the United Kingdom, in Britain, look at the nature of their current state of government. I'm going to call it a dystopian nanny state under Keir Starmer. And you're looking at a situation where people are being arrested for things they tweet online. Not because they're inciting violence or declaring a need to overthrow the government, despite the fact that some cases have been termed quote-unquote incitement. In a lot of cases, they just upset your pussy neighbor, your Karen of a neighbor, and she calls it in. And next thing you know, you're literally getting a knock on the door from the Metro Popo under Sir Mark Rowley, who a while back had the interesting notion he was going to extradite and indict and convict Elon Musk, who I personally despise, but beyond that, he said things that he said under the auspices of the First Amendment and did so on American soil. So despite the fact I don't like the guy much, I gotta remember how I got around this bullshit. I think you sidestep into this and just go around through the woodwork, because you're not gonna make it through there. So we'll navigate this instead. Hello, frog. So you have these idiots running Britain. I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. Basically, moving to a state of mind where we kind of fought a revolution over this shit a while back and dumped some tea in harbors and the like, because they didn't like things being said before we were the U.S. But now that we are, we won a war, and there's probably a lot of reason why they're not speaking German right now, if you want to get chauvinistic about it. The bottom line is, you have people actually being arrested for shit they're saying on social media. One case that came to, if you want to dial into this yourself, there's a YouTube channel, the Black Belt Barrister, who is a British lawyer who does kind of a John Leto equivalent from the British point of view. It's interesting stuff if you're into legal drama. And I mean, there's also legal, but I find John Leto a little bit more folksy, I guess, the word being. Kind of caters more to a common man kind of theory. And he, but the barrister guy, he covered one statement. And again, I am not a Trumper. And what I'm about to describe involves a Trumper. The difference being, it's a U.S. citizen living not in London, but somewhere nearby. And it was during the week that Trump visited England and was meeting with the shithead who is Smarmer. And he drew from her a pro-Trump statement, apparently upset her neighbor, and she again got a knock on the door from the local law and basically told her that she had to take this down and apologize, or they were going to drag an elderly cancer victim into custody for the dreaded police interview. And the reason why they dropped the investigation after all was, one, she's an American citizen, and she made it very clear she was going to probably turn this into the beginnings of an international incident, something that doesn't look good. And secondly, Trump was visiting, and it looks bad. You know, you're going to make a stink on a foreign policy level. And when Girly Arms Rowley, he's a little scrawny, little Cockney looking bitch, no offense to the Cockney, but he's not your finest specimen. And he said he was going to indict Musk. There was a backlash. Not just over here, but over there. Because there's a good deal of people over there that are sick and tired of the Labor Party's bullshit. And you may not be a pro-Trumper. Again, I'd argue myself being something in the way of a centrist. But the egregious counter opposite would be Keir Smarmer. I was wondering if this was moose poo or bear poo. But it's got hair in it. That points more towards a bear. So there is a bear in the area. Because this shit's not that old. But I'm going to go up. Take this fork and go up. If only because there's less undergrowth to go through. Left the machete at home today. And the Sherpas. You'd be amazed how much they cost. And yes, I'm joking. So, the cautionary tale of the left, and let me make one thing clear, if I guess I am going to become a little bit of a pundit today. There is the liberal left, And then there is the woke left. And they're not the same thing. The old school liberal left are still hypocritical little bitches like Bill Maher and the like. Jimmy Kimmel, if you want to do that. And yes, he got suspended. One, I knew he was going to come back. Because in a two-party system, whether you like Democrats or not, for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction, and things are cyclical. And enough of a pushback happened. He was never going to be gone for good. I don't personally care. I'm not his biggest fan. I kind of hit that one with a relative apathy. No dog in the fight, really. We have a neighbor. Whoop! We are not alone. That was probably a whitetail. Something clucking up ahead. Probably avian. Type unknown. Without visual confirmation. Gonna pause a little bit more, just kind of listen in, since there clearly is shit in here. It would be cool if it was a grouse, because I have never, despite the fact we claim to have them here, I've never seen a grouse in Connecticut, only in Vermont. I've been lazy this year. I didn't renew my hunting license yet. I got to decide if I'm going to do that when I go up next week, because it will be grouse season. Anyway, the weird thing is, a while back, the beaver up there had flooded a lot of the nesting meadows and kind of fucked up the population for grouse for a while. Last week when I was there, I saw signs of drought, which might have the opposite effect. So I'll make a point to do that when I get home today. Despite it being early fall, you should talk a little bit, because let things know you're here, because this is thick enough. You could come up close and personal with a bear. It's happened before. Not that your typical bear is necessarily aggressive about that, because one time it did happen. It was very close range, and the bear ended up running off. So in his defense, he really wanted nothing more to do with me than I wanted with him, but we did have a momentary state of acquaintance. I do appreciate him running off, though. Other times I've run into a bear a couple years back, but I have it on video, and the bear basically just walked by. Oh, how thick is this shit? Let's see. Or the trail goes that way. When I talk about the allergens, I'm talking about this yellow shit. Otherwise known as goldenrod. It is an allergen. And as you can see, there's no shortage of it. I don't really have to talk through here. The amount of background noise you're making now. Anything nearby, he knows something's coming through of relative size. So, you ain't gonna sneak up on anything in here, really. Not this time of year. You'll get soaking wet from the morning dew, though, up to your waist. But it does technically, open up, minus prickers. Anyway, it's probably enough of politics. I could rag on the right, and the Trump administration. There's plenty of fodder there. But there's also, if you look at Britain, you see the alternative extreme, and they're just as creepy, if not a little more. I'm going to move you and your pricker ass the way out of the way. They are a wee bit more creepy. Because your everyday person here so far isn't being grabbed for a casual tweet. In fact, for his first bit in office, there was a guy that a friend of mine knows, so this is third party observations, but he did say something suggesting the world might be better without a certain president, and he did get a knock on the door from the Secret Service, which the devil in that moment is really in the exact wording you used. And what I mean, and I say this in a rhetorical sense, so don't fucking wig out on me, there is a difference in the eyes of the law between so-and-so should die and I'm going to kill that motherfucker. Option one is a blunt and somewhat visceral opinion, but you're not making a given threat. The second one, pretty hard not to read, is like you're thinking that you might want to do it. And that, if they come to your front door, might lead to some unfortunate consequences. So, think before you speak. People do pay attention to what you say online more than you think. I can cite a number of different examples, one being, I think I've mentioned the 20-something before. She had an angsty afternoon. She got into it with her best friend and made a YouTube video basically saying, this is the worst day of my life and I want to bleep myself, as in unalive myself. And then stupidly, without thinking about it, she posted it. And with the typical Gen Z attention span, no offense, but I'm right and you know it, she went and she forgot all about it. Well, one of her subscribers on YouTube saw it and called the local police. And they wanted to have a chat about it because they were concerned for her. And so she stupidly, in my opinion, agreed to meet with them. This is where this thins out. And she ended up being taken to the emergency psych unit to have a chat with the nice doctors who had concerns. They didn't keep her for the 3 days, but she got lucky too. Because that happened in California, and I believe there the standard is they opt on the side of caution. We're going to stop that conversation for 1 minute to make a point of something I'm looking at right now. And as a forestry person, this is a cautionary tale. Note said caterpillar. Note the weird looking little things on him. There are caterpillars out there, and I don't have any idea what this is, where touching shit like that can be caustic as fuck or more. And I'm going to take a picture of this to catalog it, put it up on YouTube, and then there's a couple of bug channels or groups where they can identify this thing. But notice I'm not going to touch him because I don't know what he is. We'll be back in a minute while I take that picture though. Back. So the cautionary tale with this person was she posted something, and despite the fact I, with common sense, could tell she was just talking out of her ass without thinking about it. When people talk about things of a certain subject matter or nature, words can have consequences. And in the case of this girl, she pretty much was threatening suicide, and that will, under certain conditions, draw a response potentially from the authorities, and they minimally are going to do a wellness check, and sometimes they'll stay, sometimes they won't. I've actually had an experience like that where, in my case, there was no mention of the S word. There was no mention of any of that. somebody overreacted to my oversleeping. And yes, I've told the story before, but the result of the matter was I did get a knock on the door, and when I was sleeping, they came in anyway, and I was rousted out of the sleep, and they were pretty much trying to strong arm me into the same situation this girl found herself in. And I hadn't literally gone and done anything that would cause any concern to anyone in their right mind, but it's not hard to find yourself in a situation like this if you don't think about what you say. I didn't even have to go that far, and I found myself there. The other one was, I gotta remember the completely different circumstances, but they got a knock on the door too. I'm trying to remember the circumstances. It wasn't like a psych thing, but oh, actually it was. It was an older guy who I don't know if he was actually guilty of it or not, but somebody had called in, hello dear kid, had called in a, I'll have to keep an eye on that. They had called in similar concerns on their friend, and he got basically taken to the psych ward for, they ultimately let him go because he wasn't in any threat, but because, get off me you little shit. I'm going to have to retreat from this area if they're in here. In fact, I'm going to probably do that. I'm going to fall back and punt. They are mildly problematic, and I didn't bug spray today, stupidly. Anyway, yeah, we're going to fall back and get out of their territory. I ran into them last year down here, too, now I think about it. I was actually going to do a study in the, kind of find a way to infiltrate the land trust by way of offering to do a forestry-related thing to the presence of deer heads, which are flying invasive Chinese insects that have a lot of the same attributes as ticks. Whether they do spread anything is unknown, but that doesn't mean they don't. It's unknown. I am going to fall back and punt, though, to avoid further contact with them. One thing I actually have not seen in Vermont, seems to be a southern affair for that. But he ended up going, and again, he didn't even need to make any effort. His friend just called it in. And here's a fun one. I've had that done to me 3 times, including the one I just described. In one case, they came to my door. They came in, they woke me out of a sound sleep and tried to strong arm me into a fucking stay for at least the psych unit, and I abjectly refused. And through the luck of one of the cops having a little more sense than the other one, basically de-escalated the situation before it turned into something physical, which it probably would have, in other words. And probably would have been a very ugly affair for the PD in question, because they like to project their image in town as a community friendly as opposed to a fucking deer kids, as opposed to a tough guy warrior cop mentality type place. But they it's definitely time to retreat. So it would have, number one, looked bad, but you basically would have had a case where they came into a house in one of the more not poor areas and forcibly forced somebody to a psych ward, and then in the course of that, they came in with no reason, no real justifiable reason, and took the person out of there, and all the while the person's coherently telling them, I'm refusing medical service, which you have every right to do in pretty much any state in the union, regardless of blue or red standing. And it would have been an ugly affair, and basically because it would have had negative effects on my employment status at the time, I would have pursued it. Hopefully going through the undergrowth here, it'll kind of break a barrier, put a barrier between me and the deer kids. They're sneaky little bitches. That's probably the worst part. I'm going to do a check real quick. And not my favorite bug. The difference between them and ticks, too, is that ticks are generally like 1.5 meters end down. So if you coat your pants, you're usually pretty good. Minus shit like this, but that's why you check yourself frequently. But deer heads can fly. And that makes them stealthier. And like I said, normally I don't like going through shit like this, but it might actually give me a barrier to get them out of my case, off my case rather. We're going to move to another area so we don't have needless contact with them. But yeah, that would have been a fun sitch, because it would have been fun to get them into court. Because it would begin with, why did you feel like you had legal right to come into my house in the first place? You didn't have consent. You didn't have a warrant. Girlfriend's not on the lease, so her consent doesn't matter. And there was no exigence. Exigence typically being hot pursuit. You weren't pursuing anyone. You literally could hear me snoring. And apparently I snore rather loudly. And it took him 40 minutes to get in, so there was no rush. So there obviously was no emergency. But that did not stop them from coming in. That didn't stop them from coming in. And once they got there, as the story goes, I was assaulted and battered out of a sound sleep. Despite the fact they found me safe and sound, that didn't stop them. The house was illegally searched. And it was only after they found nothing, because I'd make the argument at that point the more zealous shithead of the two had made the decision this was no longer a welfare check, it was going to be a drug bust or something. Until all he found was my multivitamin, because I don't do such things. And anyone advocating that they do, well, that's a you problem. You might want to not flex certain things, because a certain person in the Bigfoot community, if you want to go with another example, uniquely of its own subject matter, who found out the hard way that words have consequences, is a person with a criminal history, and in his own home state, that means he can't own firearms. And stupidly, on a podcast, he was bragging about owning firearms, thinking that he wasn't under legal scrutiny. Well, he was wrong. They came and they picked him up, and he ended up, I'd argue he got lucky, because all he faced, I think, was like an $800 fine or something, if I remember the pace record right. But the guy, and for anyone who's going to whine, and Darren, you know who you are, about people getting into your business, unfortunately, I probably know the law better than you. I'm not a lawyer. I don't play one on TV, but I do make a hobby out of legal drama, so I do consider myself pretty well read on various laws. And when you're an ex-felon in your home state like you are, you can't own guns, bitch. But you did. And you probably, I'm going to give you really cool, for those who don't like spiders, there you go. That's an orb weaver of some kind. Wake up. See how big you are? There you go. She went and hid in her little leaf house. I see you in there, sweetheart. I just tore your house, sorry. I'm going to leave you alone, I'll let you rebuild. But she, not a dinky little thing. If I ever told the story in the Manitou area where I was picking spiders out of my hair, going through some thick piney stuff one time. That's a visual maybe not the exact species, but size-wise, yeah, that's what we were talking about 9 of them. If you want a good hard cringe. Sometimes squatching is not for the squeamish, just to drive the point home. But he was bragging stupidly about that, and well, apparently the fuzz was watching and listening, and they heard him, and he had to pay a fat little fine. And if he's smart now, he doesn't have them anymore. Because if he did, it would be a second offense. I doubt you'd be walking away without jail time, and the gentleman in question is not getting any younger, and therefore, you know, it'd be a really fucking stupid thing to lose everything over, buddy. And I say that facetiously because you're not my buddy, because I know too much about you, sorry, but that's how that is. And for all the choice things you've ever said about me, just because I'm having a petty little moment right now of expounding. What the hell are you? So, oh, it's a potato beetle of some kind buzzing around in here. I also just heard a thump over there. There's definitely something over there to my right. Deer, bear. If it is a bear, I don't currently have a magazine in something, but I will load one. I don't usually feel that sketched out in this stretch of woods. There's a first time for everything, so I mean, if you want to scold me, that's... I mean, I have both. I have the mean. Right? Don't get me wrong. I have the means of a minor firefight on me right now. I just, to avoid accidents, have the means to have it in a workable state in a count of by 4/1000. It's pointing at you with the slide racked back and something in the chamber for you if you want. And yes, you do practice that. Any martial artist who's found his way to guns will do things like that because it's a drill like any other, training-wise. If you have something like that, know how to use it. Back on topic, though, the overall statement here is words can have consequences. Sometimes overly much. Case in point, Keir Starmer's Britain in its current state. I think I have been successful too. I have not seen a deer kid since going through the undergrowth. They don't seem to want to follow you through that. So there's a case to be made for using undergrowth as a shield from a biting insect that can potentially cause you problems. We're going to move to another area where they may not be. Although it's also the area where fun and games in this area. I can offer you living proof that Connecticut does in fact have mountain lions, despite the fact that Deep says otherwise. That, of course, being Connecticut's equivalent to the DNR, or it's called in other states. Ow. Prickers just bit me if you're curious. Good old Connecticut thorn bushes. Somewhere in a Revolutionary War write-up, or they had something like that. Apparently, the explorers that came through here first had a miserable fucking time, and I can see why. There's no shortage of prickers coming through the next stretch we're coming through. And these pants are like double-stitch hiking pants, but they have a couple of rips on them. They're from the little Connecticut Valley thorn bushes. And keeping an eye out for the fucking deer kids, though. Fucking not a fan of those. Discovered those in 2013, and I am not happy for it, because when you realize what they are a creepy ass bug. They really are. So yeah, we delved a little into politics. And again, I am not particularly right or left wing. I tend to go issue by issue, and if you put them all out on a spreadsheet, I'd probably end up more in the middle somewhere. But that's not the nature of this channel per se. It's just kind of hard to avoid politics altogether these days, mainly just because of all the bullshit going on. I'd be remiss if I didn't scold a pair of little Gestapo boy wannabe ICE agents this week. Not the ones that were holding the 5-year-old girl hostage or whatever they want to deem to call it. One little badge of dishonor. They were trying to lure her dad out and effectively were holding a 5-year-old autistic kid effectively hostage to do so. And I will say this, if you are entering a period of time where, and this is the second time I've read about law enforcement doing something like this, if we're entering into a time when law enforcement thinks it's fine to hold an otherwise innocent person against their will for no other purpose than to force somebody to turn themselves in. We're living in a time where law enforcement is not that, and they're basically just another faction that's a threat to your existence. I said that. To further discredit the wannabe Gestapo, going anti-Trumper for a minute, has anyone else seen the freaking genius picture of 2 ICE agents in the middle of a 4-way intersection at the height of rush hour traffic trying to subdue a migrant in the middle of rush hour traffic in the middle of a 4-way intersection? You notice how I keep repeating that for emphasis? In the middle of a rush hour traffic situation in the middle of a 4-way intersection, maximizing the risk of safety to not only themselves and their suspect, but one of the genius agents then stands up and levels his gun and points it at the oncoming cars. Now, is it their fault for wanting to go home and get home from work on a Friday? Or is it the fault of 2 geniuses who probably could have gotten their suspect over to the sidewalk and put themselves more out of harm's way? If your answer is not number 2, you need to seek counseling immediately because you're that stupid. Yeah, I said that. And it's because of things like this and the people that are mindlessly applauding the ICE agents in their fucking excesses. You're as much part of the problem as anything else, and people like you are a lot of reason why I decided to start carrying this year. There, I said it. I've openly embraced the Second Amendment because of people like you. The fact that I carry out here for self-defense is basically an add-on, an afterthought. But there, I said that. And for anyone that wants to report that as a threat, no, it wasn't. I just remembered when I went through the woods the last time, this is the swampier way to get around that, but it's swampier. I went through the other one with less bullshit. Enough politics, though. I did promise a sighting report, and this one goes back to 1997. It is in the vicinity of the Cobble Mountain Reservoir, which is a sizable reservoir in southern Massachusetts, not far from the Connecticut border. We have a gentleman who... I actually kind of make this a point towards intended credibility, because he admits during the course of his actions out there that he was effectively poaching where he shouldn't be. And knowing what I know now about this area, if they catch you in there, you're definitely going to land, even if you're just in there at all, a criminal trespass charge. You're not allowed in there without a whole lot of paperwork with the local. They don't want you in there. Case in point, they don't want you in there. And he admitted to poaching. He made some other colorful claims. There was, quote unquote, a secret army base out there, and checkpoints and all this other stuff. And when you hear this guy's rant, you are thinking, this guy is a nutcase and completely full of bullshit. But there came the day, ladies and gentlemen, when I was in that general neighborhood and went for a drive. I wanted to see for myself. And this is an interesting report that sounds rather fanciful and the byproduct of a hunter's very active imagination. But when I saw what I saw, I had to downgrade his obvious bullshit to a standing of heavily embellished. So, secret army base, not so much. However, Immediately adjacent to the forest area near there, there's the equivalent of an old Nike missile base from the 50s, which we still have about. There's one in my own old neighborhood, currently a recruiting station for the National Guard or similar, but at one point that was a functional missile base in suburban America. And so there was a little element of truth to that. If I don't know what state that's in now, I've never been anywhere near it, and you probably can't get near it. And he also said there were checkpoints. And here's the thing, boys and girls, there are. They're just not the Army. They are the water department. There is a class of ranger in this area, affectionately known as water pigs. And they are the rangers that keep people out of restricted areas in, well, drinking, what's the right word? Wetlands / water supply areas. I don't know what the word, the word's not coming to me, but it's where they're safeguarding drinking water from evil people that would do evil things to the drinking water. And so I did see myself that there are active patrols through this area. I've never driven through there. There's one road in and one road out. And the local police, as well as the water pigs, I'm just going to refer to them as that because I don't know what their exact ranger designation is. So no offense, boys and girls, you're water pigs until you want to chime in and tell me what your official title is. Beyond that, I've never had a bad dealing with you guys. I've never actually run into you, so I don't really have anything bad to say about you. As I've driven through, you've left me alone because I haven't violated forbidden zones. But they are there, and as you get to be visually near the reservoir, they do have checkpoints down there. You're not getting near that reservoir without a very valid reason, or they're going to turn you around and probably arrest you for criminal trespass. It is... It's an interesting case file for me because on the one hand, you listen to this guy and you think he is telling a very tall tale. He's telling a just above average height tale instead. I mean, there is some fantastic shit to it, but the most outlandish parts of it actually do have a very healthy grain in truth. He just may not have known what he was dealing with. He may have made some false assumptions out of a certain level of ignorance, but when he says there's a base of something, there isn't now, unless I don't know if they're using it or not, but at one point they were. So he's not exactly making that up, and the fact is the water pigs do have a very healthy presence there. Don't kid yourself. If you try to get in there and sneak in there, one, I'll advise against, because number one, you're probably going to get caught. There's no real area I saw driving through there where you can sneak in where you're not going to be seen. If they have that heavy a presence patrolling the area, they also probably have trail cams set up in a surveillance network of sorts. And if they see you in there, that's another layer of them coming to get you later. Nothing stopping them from doing so, but I also have actually written to the governing body and asked if there were any circumstances under which you could gain access to the area. And you'll forget that I just slipped right there. It's an interesting answer I got, because there's another watershed area, that's what I was looking for before, that is right nearby. And I checked with both because they are technically under two different jurisdictions. And for the Cobble Mountain area, the answer was bluntly worded, stay out. They don't want you there. You can drive through. I'll cover that in a minute. The other one is not quite, you fucking bastard, another deer head. They're not quite as remote, but remote enough to be an interesting area to check out. That one, they made it clear, if you pay the fee and they know who you are, who's going to be with you, when you're leaving, when you're coming, what you're doing. You can pay a fee and get access to that, but you're going to probably have babysitters if you do. If you're looking to do a night op or something, they're probably not going to allow you to do that. But if you ask really nicely and you donate to the local government's good graces, there's a healthy chance they may give you limited access to the area. And how you go about doing that after that is kind of like your own plan. But they were at least willing to discuss the matter, whereas the other one, they just straight up told you don't come, or you'll be paying fines if they don't just arrest you for trespassing, which for the amount of patrols I saw in there, they're probably going to arrest you if they catch you in there. So to know ahead of time is to not make a dumb mistake. But this guy had claimed he saw two in there, a 9-footer and a 6-footer. Now you have to decide at that point if you believe him, because his credibility as a witness is, if I were going to give a credibility index of 1 to 10, I'm going to spot him a point for the honesty about poaching. I'm still going to max him out at about a 6, because some of his story, the most outlandish parts of it, actually did check out in some form. But he kind of took some liberties with it, or he just didn't know what he was looking at. Either way, he he wasn't totally accurate, but he did have some interesting observations that weren't totally off either. So bear that in mind when you do reports and follow up. Sometimes you got to go and look yourself. Don't just say it's obvious bullshit. I've also heard ones that were more plausible that turned out to be crap. I could mention people who are in the field. They know who they are, but rather than stir shit needlessly, I'll leave it be. But that's an argument for another day as to the fallibility of certain well-known squatchers who have confirmation bias and would freaking have a freaking complete and total hissy fit if you were to say they had a confirmation bias. But you do. Anyway, we're going to be back in a bit. We're going to cover some ground and get out of this little freaking deer-kid-infested hellhole and go to another one that hopefully is a hellhole without them. We'll be back in a from Allergy Central. All these yellow things are allergens. Why I'm hanging out here, I don't know, but I kind of needed a break from the deer kids in that undergrowth area. They were there. I haven't seen any in here yet, and I'm not going to linger that long. But the best thing you can do today is be a moving target, I guess. I'm going to make a point for the sake of history. When I mentioned previously seeing the mountain lion right there to get a better look. It was later in the year, so all the intervening vegetation was a lot shorter, but right at the edge of where you see those trees, he took off in there. There was a dead deer with a severed throat. Apparently, I had come upon him just scoring his lunch and scared him off. Needless to say, the best advice I can give you in a situation like that is don't linger. I don't know enough about the temperament of a mountain lion, let alone one that may or may not feel like he's outside his home range. That's a matter of speculation, though, because people have been saying for years, in Vermont they call it a catamount. I admit I have not seen one up there. Other people will tell you a different story. I have seen some weird shit in Vermont. You know that. But in this area, and to the Deep's credit, they are a little bit more open to hearing you out than some of the other areas. New York straight up will deny it. Although I had a ranger a couple years back when I was still with Nezra try to tell us that it was not, there weren't any in the areas. He's standing literally next to one of the tracks of the one we saw that night. And I pointed at the track and I called him on it. Like, tell me look me in the eyes right now and tell me that's any kind of a canine track. At which point he's like, okay, officially I'm told to tell you they're not here, but since you saw that note, it was, yeah, assume they're here and act accordingly. Yeah, I know. No kidding. I'm like, yeah, no shit. Here, I zeroed in on the big black dot on the end of the tail, which means it ain't no bobcat, because bobcats don't have much of a tail. They have a nubbin. This was something the size of a larger medium-sized dog with a tail that was quite long, ending in a black dot. That, boys and girls, is a mountain lion, puma, cougar, whatever you want to call it. And to anyone that knows the local lore, local hikers and even people from across the state line, as well as people who are hunters in the area, have said that there's been a mountain lion in the given area for years. So, having seen one, I tend to favor the version told by the locals, because this time of year especially, you do get a fair amount of human traffic through here, so people see shit. So, yeah. I'm going to move down the hill and check out another area. I'm just kind of zoning in. If you're looking, it's amazing how many bumblebees you have out in the thing right now. It's like if you focus your eyes, you can just pick up on the constant movement of easily like 30, 40 different bumblebees doing their business. I have to be careful going down the hill, though. I noticed a certain hole in the ground, and my first thought is that could be yellow jackets, and if you disturb them, they're going to chase you for a while. My uncle's dogs years ago at his place near the Wharton State Forest down there, his dogs got into a nest, and they got fucked up pretty bad. I mean, what we learned that day is a Labrador can jump in the water and cross the river and swim across. The yellow jackets will continue to cling to them and sting them. Unlike a honeybee, it doesn't die with the first sting. They keep nailing you. They will cling to you, and there are species of hornets that will cling to you and bite you too. But bumblebees, on the other hand, are not that. These guys aren't really that aggressive. See, I'm getting close to him. He's not really even that bothered by it. But they're also good little pollinators, so I'm going to leave them to their business. And beyond, it's just amazing if you focus in how many there are up here. It's cool to see that, though, because it's signs of a good ecosystem. So a little bit of nature, Dan, and I'm going to be on my way. And before the deer kids find me again. Yeah, I'm not really happy to see them in here, but unfortunately they're invasive and they're here. And despite the fact that the state has gone on the warpath like several other states with the lantern flies, of which I have killed several in my own neighborhood, they are definitely there too. They haven't really done much with the deer kids. And of the two, they're probably the more dangerous because they may or may not have tick-like attributes, by which I mean Lyme disease and the shit. So you got to watch out for them if you're in the woods a lot. I haven't seen them that much in Vermont, but down here, maybe it's a southern affair, but they are here. We definitely have them in Connecticut and have for a while. I noticed them first in 2013, but they're here. Anyway, we're going to cover some ground, take a segment break, and we'll be back in a bit and see what's going on the lower level. And we'll take things from there. See ya. I'm going to wrap this one up here, I think. I have to come to the conclusion that the deer kids have invaded the area thoroughly because I was up in the meadow. They're up there too. I'm going to go for a short hike down the lower end, but they're probably down there as well. So I just seen one fly by too. So they're out, they're about, and apparently they're hungry. So I'm not going to give them a long-standing target. Luckily, I did not upset a yellow jacket nest. That would have been an ugly affair. They suck because they do like put themselves in holes in the ground, and if you upset them, they'll chase your ass for a long time. Yeah, I got something buzzing me, so I'm going to move on. So like, subscribe, leave comments, death threats, criticism, whatever you want to do, and we'll catch you next time. So until then, bye.